Airport Warning 2026. New biometric rules for green card holders, must know. Visa status radar, YouTube script, 2,800 words. The line at the International Arrivals Terminal was moving normally, and then it wasn't. A green card holder, 16 years in the United States, a mortgage, 2 kids in school, a job he had held for a decade, stepped up to the automated kiosk the way he had done dozens of times before. The machine beeped. A red light pulsed where a green one should have been. Within 40 seconds, 2 CBP officers were at his side, not aggressive, but firm, directing him away from the main flow of passengers toward a door he had never gone through before. The room on the other side was bright, cold, and quiet, in the way that government rooms always are. This didn't unfold over hours. It unfolded in under 3 minutes. 3 minutes that threatened his right to re-enter the country he had lived in for 16 years. 3 minutes that put his green card status under active review. 3 minutes that, if he said the wrong thing or refused the wrong request, could trigger a removal proceeding he was completely unprepared for. One wrong move here, and a man who had done everything right could lose everything he had built. What CBP's new biometric enforcement framework does at airports in 2026 has caught legal permanent residents off guard across the country. The rules have changed, the technology has changed, and the consequences for green card holders who don't understand what is now being collected, stored, and matched at every major U.S. airport are severe. Most people assume their green card protects them completely at the border. They walk through with confidence, believing permanent means permanent. They fall straight into the trap. But today, you're going to do something different. For several years now, there had been signals, not from official CBP press releases, not from Federal Register announcements, just signals that the U.S. government was preparing a biometric infrastructure expansion more sweeping than anything attempted before. CBP had been building toward this quietly, yes, but also methodically in that approach. Contracts with biometric technology vendors had been expanding since 2019. Facial recognition pilots at major airports had been quietly transitioning from pilots to standard operations. Their actions followed a trajectory, a rollout pattern, almost a deliberate sequence, airport by airport, terminal by terminal, population by population. But what triggered alarm among immigration attorneys and digital rights organizations this year was that the rollout stopped being selective. It became universal, and the population being most directly affected, the population whose data was now being collected, matched, flagged, and stored in ways they never consented to, was legal permanent residents, green card holders, people who had been told for years that their status was secure. Attorneys who monitor CBP enforcement recognize the indicators: the expansion of biometric exit tracking at air, land, and seaports, the integration of facial recognition into automated passport control kiosks used by LPRs, the linking of biometric profiles to immigration databases that previously operated on separate, non-integrated systems, the sudden appearance of biometric mismatch flags in secondary inspection cases involving people with no prior enforcement history. And when new enforcement technology gets integrated without public education about what it means, the people it touches most are the ones who least expected it. In early 2026, CBP operational guidance documents and airport implementation records confirmed what legal observers described as a full deployment biometric framework, including mandatory biometric collection from lawful permanent residents at international ports of entry, a policy shift not fully implemented in over a decade of pilot programs. These are actions the government only takes when signaling a complete change in border processing posture, a transition from document-based identity verification to biometric primary verification, a shift in what counts as sufficient proof of identity at the border, or a fundamental change in what data the government believes It has the right to collect from people who already hold legal status. Observers weren't certain which framing was most accurate, or whether all three were true at once. But one thing was documented clearly across the new framework. CBP was changing its posture toward green card holders at airports. And when that happens without clear public notice, people with legal status end up in secondary inspection rooms for reasons they cannot explain and were never warned about. The alert issued by immigration attorneys and civil rights organizations in 2026 was not routine. It was not an academic legal opinion. It was urgent and specific. Attorney after attorney described the new biometric framework as aggressive in its scope, unprecedented in its application to LPRs, and most importantly, creating a new category of risk for people whose legal status had previously insulated them from border enforcement concerns. The Electronic Frontier Foundation, the ACLU, and multiple immigration legal aid networks released guidance. Their collective response was among the most coordinated digital rights and immigration warnings seen at the intersection of those two fields. Because what is being collected at U.S. airports from green card holders in 2026 goes far beyond what most people realize, and what it can trigger goes far beyond a delayed entry. Legal advocates and court records confirmed that CBP's biometric program targeting lawful permanent residents had expanded to include mandatory facial recognition scans, fingerprint recollection at new scanning stations, and iris capture technology at select ports, including airports where these systems had only recently been certified for operational use. They acted before most LPRs had any awareness the system had changed. They targeted returning green card holders at automated kiosks. They targeted travelers in primary inspection lanes where biometric capture now happens without explicit notification. They targeted individuals whose biometric data triggered mismatches, meaning the face in the camera didn't align sufficiently with the face in the file, connected to records that had been enrolled years or even decades earlier. This wasn't a security upgrade happening in the background. It was an active enforcement mechanism with real consequences for real people. And that's what made the 2026 warning so immediate. Let me explain exactly what CBP is collecting from green card holders at airports right now, because this is not theoretical, and the specifics matter enormously. When a lawful permanent resident arrives at a U.S. international airport and approaches a CBP processing point, they are now subject to biometric collection across multiple modalities. The first modality is facial recognition. Your face is scanned by a camera integrated into the kiosk or primary inspection lane. That image is compared against the photo on file in your immigration record, the photo from your green card, your visa application, or your most recent USCIS filing. If the match score falls below a threshold set by CBP, a threshold that is not publicly disclosed, you are flagged for secondary inspection. You are not told what the threshold is. You are not told what your match score was. You are simply redirected to a room where additional questions and additional biometric collection will take place. The second modality is fingerprint verification. Green card holders have had fingerprints on file with USCIS for years. But in 2026, CBP's fingerprint scanning at airports is no longer simply verifying your identity against your card. It is re-enrolling your biometric data into a unified database that connects your fingerprint profile to your entry and exit history, your flagging history, any law enforcement database intersections, and your foreign travel pattern. This re-enrollment happens without your explicit consent in most cases. It happens as part of the standard processing flow, and the data collected does not expire when your green card is renewed. It persists in the system indefinitely. The third modality is the one that has generated the most concern among legal experts. It is the biometric exit tracking system. For years, the U.S. had biometric entry tracking for foreign nationals, but no comprehensive biometric exit tracking. That gap is closing rapidly. In 2026, CBP's biometric exit program, which captures facial images of departing travelers without requiring them to stop or interact with a separate system, is operational at a growing number of major U.S. airports. For green card holders, this means your departure from the United States is now being biometrically recorded. That departure record is matched against your entry record, and any anomaly in that matching, any discrepancy in travel pattern, any gap between your stated purpose of travel and your actual duration of time abroad becomes visible to CBP in a way it previously was not. There is a specific legal vulnerability for green card holders that the biometric system has now made more visible, and I want to address it directly. Abandonment of lawful permanent resident status. A green card does not guarantee your right to re-enter the United States indefinitely. If CBP determines that you have abandoned your U.S. residency, which can be triggered by spending too much time outside the country, not maintaining a U.S. residence, not filing U.S. taxes, or a range of other factors, your green card can be treated as invalid at the port of entry. Previously, the evidence CBP used to make that determination was largely document-based: tax records, lease agreements, pay stubs. Now, biometric exit records provide a precise, indisputable record of how long you were outside the United States and how frequently you traveled abroad. If your biometric exit data shows patterns that CBP interprets as inconsistent with maintaining a U.S. domicile, patterns that you may have believed were perfectly acceptable, you can face abandonment proceedings on the spot, at the airport, without an attorney present. I want to walk through 3 documented scenarios from 2026 that illustrate exactly how this plays out. The first scenario involves a green card holder who had been traveling internationally for work, legally, with employer documentation, for trips averaging 3 to 4 weeks at a time. His biometric exit data, once compiled across a 12-month period, showed that he had spent over 7 months outside the United States. The individual trip durations were each under 6 months, but the aggregate pattern triggered a CBP review. He was pulled into secondary inspection, his green card was flagged, and he was given a notice to appear, the document that initiates removal proceedings. He had done nothing he believed was wrong, but the biometric record said something different. The second scenario involves a green card holder whose facial recognition scan at a major airport produced a mismatch flag. The reason for the mismatch was simple. She had aged significantly since her green card photo was taken, and the lighting conditions in the kiosk produced an image that the algorithm scored poorly. The mismatch triggered secondary inspection. In secondary inspection, an officer reviewed her travel history and found she had made 3 trips to a country currently under elevated CBP scrutiny. The trips were for family visits. They were legal. But the combination of a biometric flag and a scrutinized travel destination produced a 90-minute detention, a formal secondary inspection record added to her CBP file, and a requirement to present additional documentation on every future re-entry. The third scenario is the one that should concern every green card holder who has family abroad. A permanent resident returned from a 3-month trip to care for an ill parent. The trip was his second extended absence in 18 months. His biometric exit records confirmed both absences precisely. CBP determined that his pattern of absences, taken together, raised questions about his intent to maintain U.S. residency. He was issued a temporary parole document, allowing him to enter while his case was reviewed. His green card was not immediately confiscated, but he was now in a legal limbo that required an immigration attorney, thousands of dollars in legal fees, and months of proceedings to resolve. Here is what you need to do right now to protect your green card status in this biometric environment. The first step is to obtain a re-entry permit before any trip that will take you outside the United States for more than 6 months. A re-entry permit is issued by USCIS and signals to CBP that your absence was planned and does not constitute abandonment. It does not guarantee re-entry. but it provides documented evidence of intent to return that biometric exit data alone cannot provide. Apply for it before you leave. You cannot apply from abroad. The second step is to maintain meticulous documentation of your U.S. ties. This means keeping evidence that your primary domicile is in the United States. A lease, a mortgage, utility bills, bank statements, active employment records, and U.S. tax filings. In 2026, CBP can and does request this documentation in secondary inspection when biometric patterns raise questions. Having it organized and accessible, on your phone, in a cloud storage account you can access immediately, can be the difference between a delayed entry and a removal proceeding. The third step is to understand the biometric data CBP holds on you. You can file a Privacy Act request with CBP to obtain records of what biometric data they have collected and what flags, if any, exist in your file. This is not a commonly known option. Most green card holders have never requested their CBP file, but in an environment where a biometric mismatch or an anomalous travel pattern can trigger secondary inspection with no warning, knowing what is in your record before you travel is a meaningful protective step. The broader reality of 2026 is that the border has moved inside the data. CBP doesn't need to rely solely on what you say or what documents you carry. They have a biometric record of your movements, your entries, your exits, and your patterns. And that record is being compared against thresholds and models that are not transparent to you. Legal permanent residents who built their lives here trusting that a green card meant security are now navigating a system that uses precision data tools to make judgments about their status. Judgments that happen faster than you can call an attorney, faster than you can explain yourself, faster than you can understand what went wrong. Preparation is the only answer. Know your travel history, know your biometric record, know your documentation, and know that the green card in your wallet is only as strong as the evidence you can produce to support it when a biometric system in an airport terminal decides to ask questions. As this biometric enforcement environment continues to expand, more airports will go fully operational, more data will be collected, and more green card holders will find themselves in secondary inspection rooms they were never told to prepare for. But you don't have to be one of them. Knowing this does not make you a criminal. It makes you smart. It means you're prepared. It means you're protecting your family. Share this video with every green card holder you know. It might be the information that saves their status, their residency, and their life in this country. Subscribe to Visa Status Radar for more protection. We protect you with real information as the next phase of U.S. immigration enforcement unfolds.